Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, September 7th, 2023. It is 2:05 p.m. This session is set to go until 3 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110 for public virtual attendance. You may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. Assistant County Manager Rob Gilder is excused for this meeting. We'll be discussing the Thurston County Court Alternative Program Proposal Briefing. This is an informational session, and I will be passing it to Leah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Do you want to introduce yourself, Leah?
Oh, yes, sorry. Assumed you all knew me. For the record, my name is Leah Landon. I'm the Thurston County Criminal Justice Regional Program Manager. And it looks like we have our PowerPoint up and ready to go. I'm going to take the reins on that one. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as the chair mentioned, today I'm here to brief you all on where we stand with Thurston County Court Alternative Program proposal moving forward. For short, I will be referring to the program as TCAP during the presentation. The goal of this meeting is really to update the board on the progress of this proposal and just kind of give you an idea of where we're at and what that proposal looks like now that we've had a few meetings with our different stakeholders. Just for a brief review of history, in the fall of 2022, I was asked by the county manager to start looking into the homeless court model. I started doing some initial research, and in the winter, we had a meeting with, I had an initial meeting with the American Bar Association as well as San Diego's homeless court team, since San Diego is considered to have the United States model homeless court. So I met with them as well as a representative from the American Bar Association, and then gave an initial presentation on the model to the Law and Justice Council. In the spring of 2023, we had additional meetings with San Diego's homeless court team just to follow up on some questions that we had, some additional ideas that were out there. And then in summer 2023, specifically in July, Commissioner Mejia and I made a site visit down to San Diego to see the model in action. We were able to spend a day with San Diego's homeless court team, meet with them, meet with some of their service providers, their judges, their prosecutors, and their defense team, and chat with all of them, and then observe a graduation of their homeless court program. Upon return, at the end of July, I came back and the commissioner and I briefed all of you on that site visit that we had. And at that time, I was given the okay to move forward with preparing a proposal of what something like this could look like in Thurston County. So that is what we have before all of you today, is kind of, this is what we've started to come up with. And I wanted to give you all an update on what that is looking like and get your feedback as well, since you are a stakeholder in that process. So the proposal as is, I believe was included in your materials from the clerk of the board, so you should have a copy of the proposal as well as the PowerPoint. So today I'm just going to kind of move through the main hits of what this could look like. What is TCAP? Well, the big thing is it would be a hybrid approach based on San Diego's model. So it's not necessarily a homeless court, it's turned into something broader in this proposal. So just keep that in mind. Additionally, the main goal of this is to connect people to community-based service providers that can help address the root cause of their criminal behavior. So we know for some individuals, sometimes something such as substance abuse or a mental health issue can be the leading cause of their behavior. And if we're able to address and take care of that underlying root cause, we can prevent further involvement in the justice system. And the goal is to really do that here, is to remove that barrier. Based on this proposal as currently written, TCAP would be housed within the Resource Hub, which is technically within pretrial services, but we've done a great job kind of keeping it as its own entity. In addition, TCAP would be a voluntary program, similar to programs such as LEAD. People would be offered the program, but then they would have to accept or decline whether or not they want to participate, and they could end their participation at any time. Finally, TCAP does not require ongoing supervision and compliance monitoring by Thurston County Courts or pretrial services. So that is one main difference from the TCAP program, as well as some of our other programs that we already have in place, such as pretrial services diversion, that type of thing. So one of the big things, who is eligible for TCAP? In this proposal, the eligibility is broadened from of the homeless court model. Anyone is eligible if they are indigent, which would be defined and determined by the court. So when I spoke with district court, kind of the approach we wanted to take with this is if the court would give them a public defender through Thurston County Public Defense, we would consider that as indigent and therefore eligible for the program.
Just for the public,
Yeah.
what level of income or what is determined? I know each judge does, I guess, a little different, but there is some baseline, isn't there?
There is a baseline, and I'm actually not sure on the number myself. I don't know, Patrick, do you happen to know?
It's 125% below the poverty line. It's a federal guideline.
Below or,
Below.
Don't quote me on that. There's a federal guideline. The courts all have a bench book on what the poverty line is to be indigent. Based on family size, right? Yeah, it's
My understanding is that as of right now, district court will ask an individual if they can afford the attorney, and if they cannot, then they will be appointed one by public defense. And we were comfortable continuing to use that way of determining whether or not someone was indigent. But I would be happy to go back and also pull the definition for you if that would be helpful.
it might, just because we get asked about, where do the taxpayers pick up the bill and where's the deadbeat pick up the bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I will get that information back to all of you after the briefing. So if an individual is indigent and has an active misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, they would be eligible for the program, but this would exclude sex offenses and domestic violence offenses, which is similar to San Diego's homeless court model.
Drunk driving, where's that?
San Diego does include DUIs in theirs. But I will get
More
to
than once?
that I'm not sure on, but we'll also touch on that a little bit in the next couple of slides.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Carried away, sorry about that.
Ask questions as they come up, please. I know it's a lot of information. Also, in the full launch of the program, we would like to propose including traffic tickets and citations. I know the Veteran Service Hub recently talked to all of you about how many people they have with outstanding traffic tickets and citations that they really can't do anything with, but they can't pay them off and individuals can't afford to pay them off. That would be something that we would like to address with this program as well, in addition to those who have a conviction and have legal financial obligations still from those convictions. Any questions on that?
No, I will wait.
So the first thing I wanted to share with all of you, and the way I thought it might be most effective to walk through this is by showing kind of the TCAP roadmap and what this could look like. So step one would be a client is charged with an eligible misdemeanor or after a full launch could have an eligible conviction or traffic tickets. Once they're charged with that eligible misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor, and the prosecuting attorney and public defense agree that they could be a good fit for the TCAP program, that program would be offered to the individual. If they agree to participate, then we would move to that step two, where the client does agree to participate and a TCAP agreement is signed. This would,
At that point, they don't know what they're gonna have to do, right?
no, they would be shared information on the program, what is offered, but they, at that time, they likely would not know which service provider, for example, they would be partnered with. So once that TCAP agreement is signed, that would move them over to the program, where they would be referred to the TCAP program coordinator, who would be housed within the Resource Hub under the Resource Hub program manager. At that time, the program coordinator would work with the service providers that are currently with MOUs with the TCAP program, and based on the person's needs, they would be connected to a relevant service provider. So my understanding from some of the stakeholders is that oftentimes when prosecutors or public defenders are working with individuals, they get an idea of what their problem might be. Substance abuse, mental health issues, or something else. They can take that information and share it with the program coordinator, who can also meet and talk with the individual to determine which service provider might be a good fit. At that point, they would.
Provider, you said, I mean, a lot of folks have lots of issues going on.
Mhm.
So are they just gonna be connected to one, or might they get 4 or 5, and how do you keep consistency on that from defendant to defendant? So one person's not asked to, move a mountain, and the other one,
Yeah.
does a monthly class.
So they would be connected to a community-based service provider that offers holistic case management. So that service provider would then administer any necessary assessments that the person needs in order to determine what the breadth of their issues are. And from there, that provider would move forward with putting the appropriate supports in place for their different.
Is
the
that
different needs.
standard operating procedure for different types of providers? Or is that, we'd have to handpick a couple, three that would do that kind of initial assessing and,
Not all service providers offer that level of holistic case management, but my proposal is for the pilot project to RFP and then get an idea of the service providers that are
so
interested in.
we'd
the
have that
work.
expectation that whoever
Yes.
they're referred to out of the gate would have to do a more comprehensive look
Yes.
at, okay, I got you.
Yes. Each service provider that has an MOU with the TCAP program and is offering services would have a list of services that a client is required to complete in order to be eligible for graduation from the program. So that is, again, unique to each service provider, what they're going to require each person to do. Once the person has engaged in community-based services and we have verified that they've completed all of the TCAP requirements, then the service provider will refer the client for graduation to the TCAP program coordinator. At that point, the TCAP program coordinator would again verify that they've met all the requirements and completed everything they needed to for graduation. And then once they've confirmed that eligibility for graduation, there would be a monthly case review team that would meet, that would be comprised of the prosecutor's office, public defense. If interested, a judge could be a part of that as well, in addition to the service providers, at which point they would determine the outcome of the case. So do we want to dismiss the charges based on what the person accomplished during the TCAP program? Yes, okay, and then on the date of graduation, the court would do that. The other unique piece about the TCAP graduation is that this would not be held in the actual courthouse, this would be held at a community-based service provider facility. And we could rotate that throughout the community. The Veteran Service Hub has said that they would be interested in providing their space for graduation ceremonies as well. But there are some logistics we would need to work out, as all court proceedings do need to be recorded. But it did not sound like that was something that was insurmountable. That was a lot. Are there any questions on this kind of roadmap piece before I move to the next slide?
What's the population base that has been served at your pilot that you went down, San Diego, was it?
Yeah, so San Diego sees maximum 60 people per month.
60
Yes, yes, sir.
under this, and what's the population down there? I'm just trying to carry, we're 300,000 in the county, so. Is this gonna take in municipal violations?
No.
Just all county violations?
Well, technically anyone in district court, so everyone except for Olympia, I believe, they come to district court, so
Okay.
that we would.
So they're all
accept.
gonna be, Tumwater, Yelm,
Yes.
Lacey, maybe, they're all gonna be eligible to participate, and they're paying for this service, those municipalities, because they give us a little something for the courts, right?
As part of my proposal right now, the municipalities would be a part of that program, yes.
And, okay,
And I'm
Good
not
questions.
sure,
I think, yes, if we provide services to municipalities, they need to contribute to the process.
yeah. just
I don't
can't
think it
figure
should
out.
be included on the contracts we currently have under district court. So it should be outside of that.
Okay.
and I'm not sure on the San Diego population, but I'd be happy to look that up and send that
Well,
to you.
I was just wondering what the population was they served, I don't know if.
Yeah, I
we-
looked at it, I had the same question and it was,
Okay, well, then I'm gonna let
Significantly larger.
you ask a better question than I do.
no, you asked the question, I mean, it was, I don't remember the ratio, but it was, cause I had the same thing, are we gonna be able to generate that volume, given our population was like a tenth or a sixth or something?
Yes.
It wasn't more than 10 times bigger, but it might have been,
Their
might have been 3
population-
million versus 300,000, I think it
So, yeah, so
it might
I
be-
remember our initial briefing.
might be that there are 10 times more people.
Something to keep in mind though is that the, as currently written, the eligibility here is a bit broader though, so we would,
Right, we're not
We've
factoring
already
in the
get some more
homeless factor necessarily.
no.
It's not limited to just those without home, so we could broaden it there.
The San Diego model doesn't factor the homeless factor either. That was one of the questions that I asked. I was like, do they have to be homeless and what does homeless constitute, right? Do they have to be? And I think that's why in discussions, we kind of made it more of an indigent just because that's kind of the
Broader.
model
Yeah.
It
that
seems
they're
to be
following.
very narrow in the scope when we talk about homeless court, narrow down what the
Yeah.
definition of homeless, which not necessarily intent.
And that's specifically actually the model that they're following is more of an
trying.
indigent rather than homeless or houseless, because they were like, well, a lot of our clients are housed or, you know,
They're in temporary housing.
they're in temporary,
at
or
risk
just
of being
another different
unhoused.
situations of housing. Sorry, go ahead.
So I did add an additional slide because in some of the conversations I had, it seemed that this could be an appropriate avenue for some of those simple possession cases as well. So this is just to give you an idea of how that might look a little differently, which is where a client
I'm
would.
sorry, Patrick and Christy, the microphone is picking your conversation up.
Apologies, we did verify this population and Patrick's looking at the federal poverty rate. So 3.29 million is the population for Greater San Diego. So,
It's about 10 times, yeah.
Yeah. sorry, we're trying to follow up on what your questions were.
Thank you.
So in this case, a client would be cited and released on simple possession by law enforcement, and then once the prosecutor's office or district court received those charges, they could determine if a person might be eligible through TCAP, and then they could be connected to the LEAD program through TCAP. So it's just another means of shifting those people into LEAD through our system. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, there would be a TCAP review team that would meet monthly prior to graduation. That review team is responsible for determining the outcomes of cases for those who are eligible for graduation from the program. So this review team would meet monthly. Initially, it would be chaired by myself and the Resource Hub program manager in hopes of a permanent review team chair becoming the TCAP program coordinator when hired. And that review team membership would be comprised of the prosecutor, public defender, applicable service providers, and the TCAP program coordinator moving forward. So that's just an idea of what that team would look like, and they would meet at least monthly to make
How
decisions.
long
on
do you
those cases.
anticipate that meeting? Once a month?
Well, based on the pilot, which I'll cover in a few minutes, I would expect it to be maybe an hour to 2 hours. So what's next? Now you kind of have an idea of what this could look like here in Thurston County. What's next is, at this time, we're going to continue engaging with stakeholders. So we do have the gentleman from San Diego who is their homeless court lead. I was speaking with him yesterday as well as today. He's actually going to be in Portland on October 4th to help them implement their homeless court. And he said that he would happily make the drive up to Thurston County to visit us all on October 5th. I know you all have a day-long budget presentation session that day, so I'm currently working with schedules to see if we can get time for folks set aside with him for those who have questions about San Diego's homeless court model and do want to talk to him one-on-one. But if for some reason we're unable to get people in the room with him who do want to talk with him, then we can set up a follow-up session via Zoom. After that, after we've continued engaging with stakeholders, we would present a final proposal. So at this time, I've met with the Resource Hub, Pretrial Services, District Court, Public Defense, and the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And we are going to continue having meetings on an ongoing basis. Some stakeholders do have logistical concerns that we're continuing to work through. This is a new program. It would be a large undertaking. And so I'm doing my best to meet with stakeholders as those concerns come up and discuss them. The hope is that once we have a final proposal, of course, that would be brought back to all of you. And that would incorporate all stakeholder feedback as appropriate. After that, that final presentation would be brought to all of you, where you would hear the final proposal and we would ask for your okay to move forward to step number 3, which is the TCAP Implementation Committee. So while there is a program proposal, there's a lot of big logistical pieces that are going to have to get worked out. That is where the TCAP Implementation Committee comes in, and this is gonna kind of be that first big step. So this Implementation Committee would be the Resource Hub Program Manager, the Director of Pretrial Services, the Director of Public Defense, the Court Executive Officer for District Court, the Prosecuting Attorney's Office, a District Court Judge, and as we determine service providers, they would be added to this committee as well. This committee would meet at least monthly in order to ensure that we can properly develop the program in an appropriate timeline. This full list is also in your, in the proposal that you received. But the TCAP implementation committee would be responsible for selecting the pilot service providers. So as I mentioned, in a pilot program, we would send out an RFP in order to find the most appropriate service providers for our needs. This implementation committee would be responsible for selecting those providers. In addition, they would be responsible for approving requirements, which must be met for successful completion of TCAP for each of the service providers. And Commissioner Edwards, I think to your point about the DUIs, they would also be responsible for creating the final list of offenses eligible for TCAP participation. So there is, you know, in my draft proposal, it's misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, but I know that I'm not the ultimate authority here, and that is really a decision that is up to the stakeholders. And so that would be another responsibility of this group. In addition, the group would consider how TCAP can implement restitution cases. They would consider whether any felonies should be added to the eligibility list. They would discuss and agree to any compliance requirements stakeholders would like in place.
Let me ask you a question on that. Where any felonies might be added, so are you including somebody from Superior Court to be involved in that part, or?
Yes, at that point, we would include someone from Superior Court for that discussion. The group would be responsible for discussing and agreeing to any compliance requirements stakeholders would like in place for service providers. So this comes down to, we don't have ongoing monitoring of the individuals while they're engaging in the program. But we want to know if someone has not checked in with their service provider in 3 weeks, right? We need to know if they've just kind of disappeared. So that's where this comes in. The TCAP implementation committee would be responsible for creating compliance requirements that need to be noted. So if they say after 3 weeks, we need to be notified that someone hasn't shown up and hasn't engaged with you, that would be placed into a service provider's MOU as well to ensure that as they move forward, if they have someone who has stopped engaging, they're responsible for reporting that to the program so that it can be reported back to the prosecutor's office. In addition, the TCAP implementation committee would be responsible for creating the TCAP agreement for the courts. So similar to a diversion agreement that we currently have, it would be like that. It would just be TCAP specific. The group would also be responsible for selecting a reoccurring graduation date and determining when to begin accepting those with traffic tickets and citations and outstanding legal financial obligations. The committee would also meet on an ad hoc and ongoing basis as needed to work out any operational issues that arise and select additional service providers should the program expand. Once the implementation committee has worked out that giant list of logistical things to take on, we would hopefully be able to hire a TCAP program coordinator. So that would be kind of the largest budget request for this program, would be a person to do the TCAP program coordination. Like I mentioned earlier, they would be housed in the Resource Hub under the Resource Hub program manager. But we would also recommend that the BOCC revisit the program in the midterm budget cycle to ensure that all law and justice stakeholders have the appropriate level of resources. Once the program coordinator is hired, we would want to start a pilot project. So now we have the logistical pieces worked out, we have a program developed, and we have a program coordinator in place. We can create a pilot program. My recommendation in the current proposal is to limit this to no more than 3 service providers. I do feel that LEAD is a strong candidate for one of the service providers, and I think that should continue to be part of the discussion. But ultimately, we could RFP for all 3 service providers if needed. In addition, in order to ensure that this is not a large incoming undertaking of people, the pilot project would accept no more than 10 participants at a time and on a staggered basis. So in month 1 of the pilot, we would take in 5 participants, in month 2, 3 participants, and in month 3, 2 participants for a total of 10. Additional participants may be accepted if service providers feel that they have the capacity to do that, but that would be something that would be left up to the service providers and implementation committee to decide. And then again, recommending that the participants be staggered to ensure that they graduate and additional spots open up for the program at various times during the pilot. After at least a 6-month pilot and on an ongoing basis during that pilot, we would be soliciting feedback from stakeholders and participants. What works? What doesn't? Where do we still have room to improve, and what can we be doing differently? That's all things that we want to be getting from this pilot program. So we would be doing that during the pilot, and again, on an ongoing basis. And should everything go well, after our pilot, we would then be able to launch TCAP in full. A full program launch would, in short, be engaging additional service providers and accepting more participants should we have the capacity. I propose starting with 3. San Diego currently has 97 service providers that they work with, which is pretty incredible. And there's a lot of service providers in our community that would be really great fits for this program. So with a full launch, I think there's plenty of people that we could engage with and plenty of services that we could be providing to people.
I did have an initial meeting with the service providers, just to just engage with them about this proposal, and I was very excited, I guess, to see that some of them had been looking at this model, and we heard specifically from HUD, they were like, oh my gosh, we've been looking at this model, we didn't know who to talk with. It's exciting that this program is coming to Thurston County. There was a lot of positive engagement from a lot of the providers, and there was a lot of interest from a lot of the providers about something like this happening in Thurston County, which getting that that feedback was really good. And I did that just initial reach out just to see if, just to gauge interest. So just kind of wanted to let the board know about that initial feedback from the service providers. I know that those relationships can sometimes be hard to navigate, and Commissioner Munster, you have questions, sir?
I have a question. I mean, the service providers, we're not reinventing the wheel here in a sense. There's, if I'm remembering correctly, Olympia Community Court has 17, I want to say, number 6 in my head for some reason, 17 service providers. So there is a network there. And then when we were pulling the resource hub together, Pat led, and I was at almost all of them, a series of stakeholder meetings between a network of service providers, a lot more than 3, that basically helped us brainstorm and get the resource hub put together. So, I mean, if 3 is enough, that's fine, but we might be in a
Yeah.
position to go bigger than that just because these service providers are already kind of engaged in this type of work.
Absolutely, and I will say that is something I did not mention. Part of the reason for the recommendation to place this program within the Resource Hub is because of its connection to service providers and stakeholders in our community. Not to toot Nate's horn over there, but they're getting ready to see their 1,000th visitor. That'll probably happen sometime in the next week or so, which is incredible, and I think a testament to the services that are being provided there. So the Resource Hub does already have that connection, but also has established relationships with the judges, the courts, prosecution, public defense, pretrial services itself. And so it kind of made sense as a place to put this, since they have such a strong relationship with all of those entities and our community-based service providers.
And just making them dollars connect for me, is in the Resource Hub, we're just connecting people to stuff, but here with this program, we're offering them this opportunity that might impact their criminal, so they go to the program coordinator, they get sent off to, I don't know, let's say it's Northwest Resources. Okay, Northwest Resources does kind of a full assessment, and you need to do, you really need some mental health help, I'm gonna send you over here. You also need to do some substance abuse counseling here. And then, but there's tricky finances around all that, isn't there, in terms of, some people are eligible for.
Yeah, and that is a good point, it's eligibility, which is within your thought process, well, you need to have an MOUs with those
Yes.
service providers. Because that's where we're gonna start defining eligibility, compensation, and making sure that we don't just go on a blank slate, because we couldn't. I think we need to make sure we cross all the Ts and dot all the Is on that.
Yeah, and I don't need to know the answer, I just need to know there is an answer, because
Yes.
you can't have a situation where it only turns out that certain stratum of people get to participate because of their eligibility or their resources, and then there's a gap where people would be perfect and we're referring them and they get like, well, sorry, you can't pay,
Right.
you're not eligible for this.
Yeah, there's absolutely an answer there and work to be done with the service providers, and I think that would be part of the RFP process as well as that MOU that we would be putting in place. That does bring me to the budget placeholder. I wanted to make sure to touch on this since we did put a placeholder in the budget for about $100,000. So we have that budget placeholder for this budget cycle. In addition, if we chose to move forward with the program, I would apply for the Department of Commerce's Burn Jag Innovation Fund. They are sending out that solicitation again in a couple months. And that would be an opportunity to apply again, and that is about $150,000. The budget placeholder we have here would be for $100,000 with $50,000 for treatment sales tax, $20,000 from the home fund, $20,000 from the veterans fund, and $10,000 from the general fund. As I mentioned, the big ask here would be that we'd want that TCAP program coordinator position. That would be a full-time FTE under the.
That's what this money's funding?
Partially. In addition, though, with any money we get from like the Burn Jag Innovation Fund as well, if we're able to bring additional money in, our hope would be to contract that out to the service providers. So give them a certain amount of money for the purposes of increasing service capacity to serve TCAP participants. We do know that that is an issue for some service providers. Right now, capacity is a problem. And so by providing funds to help increase their capacity, we feel that that may make it more manageable for them as well. So those are kind of the two main uses of the budget that we would be looking at for the TCAP program right now.
So I would just like to underline that this was a placeholder that we put in before Leah had an opportunity to kind of flesh out
Yes.
what the proposal is. So now that we know what's under consideration, we can adjust the amount and the funding sources to reflect the proposal better. We'll do that during the budget process.
So it'd be
When
two,
it's
it'd be
something-
250 instead of 100.
Well,
Because
we,
that's what
If-
she's
If I
referring
got
to.
the Burn Jag Innovation Fund money that I would like to apply for in a few months, then it would be 250. 150 from them, 100 from the county.
It's a match.
I didn't hear anything about electronic monitoring or some kind of alcohol monitoring, drug monitoring. Anything like that fit in this?
I don't believe that EHM would. Substance monitoring, though, would be through the service provider. So if a service provider felt that that was an appropriate means for someone, then they would be recommending that and then putting that in place.
How come you don't think EM would fit?
I'm not sure that any of the service providers currently offer that service. That's the only reason I'm hesitant on that one.
The courts are using EM.
Yes, but this program is outside of the court. It's with those community-based service providers.
Okay.
It's not necessarily through the court, so it is separate in that respect.
Is there gonna be like a set of screening criteria? Like, I mean, at the beginning, you're trying to actually say 5, 10, you know, but maybe looking down the road to when the program's at full. Like, okay, no DV, no sex offense, but misdemeanors, but does the prosecutor get to say, no, you've got too much criminal history, or I don't really like the facts of this, and you know, or is it, there's gonna be criteria, and if you meet them, you're gonna be offered this?
That's a good question and not something that I've really considered.
It could go either way.
Yeah,
You
I
could
think it
decide,
could go
okay.
either way, and that would be something I would leave up to, for example, the prosecutor's office and public defense and the judges to kind of talk about and see what fits best. It does make sense in one respect to have criteria, but also in some respects, there are going to be individuals that maybe just don't fit the bill for the program, even though they meet the criteria. In the proposal that I have at this point, my thought process has been that the prosecutor and the public defender do need to agree that the person's an appropriate match for the program. And if one person says, no, I don't think so, then they won't move forward at that time. But I do think that's a really great comment and idea and something that we should consider. Any more questions?
Can you stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, I do have another question.
Yeah, of course.
Do we have time?
You got 20 minutes.
So the clientele that you're gonna be dealing with, I try to think of those, they kind of fall in two categories from a simplistic point of view. You've got good citizens making bad choices, and then you've got people that just don't give a damn. So will this work for the people that just don't give a damn? They're willing to poop in your doorway out at the store, or and they're under the influence all the time versus the citizen that, I don't know, he probably does care, just making some bad choices. So I'm kind of trying to relate that to the clientele that they saw down in when you visited down in San Diego.
Yeah, you know, I will say, I think it can help both types of people that you just mentioned, you know. The people who are always intoxicated and having a hard time, they may just need that barrier removed. They may need the opportunity to go into a holistic case management program that offers them treatment. And they may need just that hand and that barrier removed. And once they have that and they've been sober for a few months and they've gotten the opportunity to get a job and make connections and relationships, they may be okay. And there's some people who it won't work for, but there's a lot of people that it would benefit and would be supported by the program.
Is there any use of chemical anti-intoxicants, I guess is the best way to put it? I don't know.
You're thinking like a prescription medication to
Yeah,
prevent-
something, okay, that you give them and they get sick if they utilize an opiate or alcohol or, I mean, we used to use that many years ago and it was pretty effective. I mean, we didn't have all the other program that went with it, but they just had to report in and take it.
Yeah, I don't believe that,
Anabuse, I
I-
think, was the,
That's what interview is.
Yeah.
Anabuse is what they use.
DUIs.
For
I
DU
can't
yeah.
speak to whether or not any of our community-based service providers use that. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if San Diego uses that at all. But I would be happy to ask, and it's something that we could ask the different providers, but I can't speak to if any of them offer that.
Folks who don't follow, well, the ones who don't give a damn, as you say, will not want to participate, and then nothing's changed, they just go through the system, or maybe they think they're gonna game the system somehow and participate, and they, you know, that might delay things for a few months, but ultimately they're gonna fail and be right back where they started. So it doesn't really,
Well, and you know, for some people, it takes a couple tries. I think we had this conversation in San Diego where they have people who have been through a couple of times. And after that second or third time, that's when it's stuck. You know, for some individuals though, they need that hand. For a lot of people, especially those who are indigent or unhoused, treatment is not readily available. Neither is that support out in the community. You have to be involved in the justice system in order to really get connected to it. Like if you can't afford to walk into Kaiser and ask for intensive treatment, then you don't get it unless you're connected to the justice system and you don't have that option.
what I like about this idea as a pilot is that it's giving everyone that opportunity, or hopefully almost everyone that meet those criteria with minimal, like government staffing, you know,
Right.
building a building and creating court dockets and hiring judges and this is really like using the system, the community system in place to give folks a chance to show that they want to make a change. If they don't, we just proceed as we always have. But we're not having to invest in a whole bunch of people and brick and mortar to stand something up that may or may not work. It seems like a low and potentially high reward for a low county investment.
Yes.
So it seems like a really good thing to take a shot at, from my perspective.
Commissioner Edwards and then Romero.
Did those individuals that might have failed through the process in San Diego, did they issue warrants for them if they didn't complete the program and didn't show up for court?
No, they did not. So in San Diego, you're not actually referred into the program until you've completed all of the work with the service provider. There's also no agreement between the person and the prosecutor's office or the court that's in place. So they're not expected to be showing up for court or anything while they're engaging with that service provider. So in short, no warrant would be issued during that time.
Well, not during the time as much as, okay, they failed the program, whatever that means. What's the consequences?
There, there are no consequences for failing the program. If somebody has completed the program and then they go out and they reoffend, say they get another DUI, then that just comes back into the court, but there's no consequence for having reoffended in the same
Well,
manner.
no, not so much the reoffending, but what's the consequences of not finishing the program? So,
There is none, they just return to the traditional justice.
Yeah,
Go to
there's-
court.
They go to
Yeah,
court.
they go to
Did
court.
they get a court date at some point? I mean, how do they get their
well,
court?
yeah, how do they get a hold of these people? And the
When
thing
do
I'm
they really
asking-
cut the line? Who cuts the line and gives them their court date? Okay, you're done, you stopped coming to treatment. Now show up in court on November 3rd. Does that happen?
And
I
then they
would
don't
have to
show
double
up.
check
What
on that
happens?
process. If they don't show up to court, a warrant would be issued, but I'm not sure if there's a specific timeline on which, okay, you had 6 months to engage with this service provider and you didn't, so we're going to issue a court date. But if they were issued a court date and they did not appear, a warrant would be issued.
So this could be like a tool to issue a warrant, keep them out of town. Because I don't think any of the municipalities are entering warrants on the misdemeanor level anymore. Because it could lead to something more serious and they don't wanna have that problem, so. If they just go over to Lacey or out of Olympia or Yelm, they don't serve those warrants, or Pierce County or. So I'm just curious, we need a hammer somewhere along the line.
Well, the hammer is like if they fail the program, right, like their cases go back to
To
the
traditional.
the traditional, like,
Yeah.
this is just an
Just
option for them not to follow that traditional,
And like,
right? So once they
Yeah.
fail the program, they go the traditional route where they have their cases filed, they have, to go in front of a judge, and then at that point, if
and so that's something I would recommend for that TCAP implementation committee, if you all gave me okay to move ahead with something like that, is that committee would be the one responsible for deciding what those compliance requirements are. Again, if someone hasn't checked in X amount of time, do we want that reported back to the prosecutor's office? Yes, okay. And the prosecutor's office can say, we're gonna revoke that agreement and we're gonna bring them back into the traditional system. Or we got a hold of them, we're gonna give them another chance.
There's friendship diversion program, right? That's kind of the same deal. I mean, you go off and then prosecutor gets notice that,
Did they have a percentage of failure down there?
They did not.
and the
Well, I
reason
mean,
they
they
didn't.
must have had some failure, didn't they?
Well, they've had some, I asked specifically about the data and how they were tracking, and their model has changed. Over the 10 years that they've been doing this, their model has changed quite a bit, and that's how they kind of landed where they're at now. And so, what Matt said, when it comes to because I was like, is there a recidivism rate? What is it? And he was like, we're actually just starting to really track this. The program has changed and that model has changed so much over the years. There was no real way to track it just because the criteria kept changing, the players kept changing. And so now that they've landed in a stable model that's actually working for them, and, this is the reason why they're recognized, it's because out of all those shifts and models, this is the model that's working in San Diego. Now they're actually starting to track that information and gather that data. So at this point, they're not offering concrete numbers just because it's something that they've just started tracking, so.
It
They-
did sound like though they were hoping to partner with a local university, if I remember correctly, to do a study on that moving forward. But I think that would be something we would want here, is to immediately have a process in place for collecting and tracking that data and outcomes for
I'm
individuals.
trying to figure out a way to measure success.
you said that they don't even, they complete and then they get in, accept, so is that what you meant by there's no failure rate because they're not accepted till they've succeeded?
Yeah, like they're not technically referred to the program as a whole until they've completed the engagement with the service provider. That's when the case gets referred and they receive it.
Somewhere somebody could count the number of people that engaged and got
Well, and
started.
I think ultimately they could go back through and they'd probably have to do it by hand, would be my understanding, which is a lot for a county that large, but they could go back through and count the number of people who have graduated from their homeless court program and then shown back up in the system.
I mean, if they've kept it in place for 10 years, they must be able to equate that to less jail occupancy or something to.
It's actually more than 10 years as well. It's closer to about 25 at this point that they've had their homeless court in place.
I don't know why I said 10.
Close. It's close.
Okay, Manager, go ahead.
So, Leah, great presentation. In terms of the process and the next steps, not necessarily as for the board to approve, we go ahead and the implementation committee. I think the next step is really go back to the stakeholders,
Yeah.
addressing some of the questions that we have received already, gelling all that, addressing some of the concerns if there is need to be addressed, and then bring back another briefing to the board related to what was the result of the additional stakeholder engagement, and at that point, we'll ask the board for direction.
100%, yes. Not asking for any decisions today, just asking for your feedback and giving you an update on where we're at. And then, yes, once we've completed additional work with the stakeholders, we'll bring that full final proposal back to all of you.
And maybe at that point, if there's an opportunity to address some of the questions that you heard today from the
Yeah.
board members, that would be great to fold into that.
For sure.
Thank you. Okay, well, Leah, I just want to thank you for all of your work on this. You've been very thorough throughout this whole process. And while this proposal, right, like once you got it, you really were trying to connect the dots on how it would be, how it would work in Thurston County. I know you've been engaging with stakeholders quite a bit. I've engaged with several of the stakeholders as well on this project. And so I really want to thank you for all of your work on this because you've done an amazing job. You really have. And, you know, it's just great to kind of see what you've done. I reviewed the proposal and we've been checking in quite regularly about this. So just wanted to really show my appreciation to all the work that you've done.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, 2:52, you're adjourned.